to thank you for all that you've been doing over the last year and a half. Your website has been a really, really interesting read. You rightly highlight that there can be no moral equivalence between the two sides in this war. But how do you cover Russia? What do you do? What sort of language do you use? And do you have any contact with Russian journalists to help you cover that?
So first of all, we don't really have much contact with Russian journalists. There are several aspects to that. First of all, for many Ukrainians, including myself, it is, I would say, challenging emotionally and on other levels to have any contacts with anyone Russian. As I sometimes travel to conferences and events like that, I run into my Russian colleagues from the so-called liberal Russian media. They normally don't seem very interested in talking to me or other Ukrainian journalists. When there is a conference with both Russian and Ukrainian themed panels, Ukrainians come to the panels of Russian journalists to hear what they have to say. Russians don't come to the panels of Ukrainians. Unfortunately, there has been a certain level of arrogance that has always been in the relationship of Russians and Ukrainians, and that has not gone anywhere. I've never had a Russian journalist approach me and ask how they can help us, ask to share contacts or something like that. That's never happened. As for how we cover Russia, we do write stories about Russia, about internal events in Russia. We have, even though we are not there, we understand the language. My first language is Russian. It's true for many people in Ukraine. And we understand the internal politics and situation there usually better than our Western colleagues. And we exercise that knowledge. We have people on the staff who write about Russia and freelancers. But we don't do it that much just because the primary focus now is Ukraine, but we want to develop it and to do more Russian coverage. For many, many years, Ukraine was covered for the world through a Russian lens because all the bureaus were in Moscow and they would write about Ukraine sitting in Moscow. I'm excited about having an opportunity to cover Russia from sort of a more, not exactly Ukrainian lens, but a balanced lens. And just one important note, it probably doesn't make its way to readers in the West, but in Ukrainian media, there has been a trend since the start of the full-scale invasion to use a certain language when writing about Russia, about Russian troops, certain language to kind of try to humiliate them in news stories, such as there are many media publications that have accepted the rule to not write Russia with a capital letter in Ukraine. That was their way to point at the fact that it is a failed state. There are many synonyms used for Russian troops in Ukrainian media language to highlight how inhumane they are and so on. We never do that because we think that we don't need to invent new vocabulary to talk about Russia. We think that when we write about something horrible done by Russian troops, it's, that's enough. That's already telling you and conveying to you what Russians are now, what Russian troops are doing, and we avoid all this emotional language because we think that keeping it pure and simple is actually stronger. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, I think we've got one here. Oh, we've got one as well. Just go to this one first. Sorry. We'll come to you next. Oh, sorry. Just go to one here.
Liz Bilbao from the Daily Mail. Really inspiring, and Kiev Independent obviously has been an integral reading throughout the war. What's been your kind of response to the reporting of the war from the British press? Of course, Daily Mail, the biggest campaign we've ever done was fundraising for the humanitarian aid in Ukraine, and they did their campaign as well. And obviously, the British press itself has been trying to hold Russia to account for its actions and try to report frontline. What's been your thoughts on kind of the British perspective on the war?
So I mentioned in my speech the editorial that we did as a response to the New York Times offering to make concessions. The Daily Mail reprinted the whole editorial. We learned about it actually a couple months later, and it was surprising and a good thing to do. So thank you for that. And I know, I'm not going to be given specific examples, but there were a number of mistakes being made in the British press that were not exactly the kind of mistakes that would harm Ukraine, but they were misleading stories, especially in the first few months of the war, of the full-scale war. Stories like, so I don't remember who did the story, like a profile of the ghost of Kiev. I hope it wasn't the Mirror. I don't know. So for those of you who don't know, the ghost of Kiev was the supposedly a genius pilot who was defending the skies above Kiev in the first weeks of the war. It was sort of a myth that was invented by, I think, somebody in the government. I don't know. It was very uplifting for the people to read about this person who supposedly stayed anonymous so that Russians would not target him and so on. That was not true, of course. We didn't report about the ghost of Kiev because we knew through our sources in the military that it's not an actual thing. But the Western media loved the story. And somebody, there was one profile about this anonymous person in the British press, at least one that I can remember. And I think there was later a story that he was killed, also in the British press, which was not true because he never existed. And one thing that was happening a lot, and also in those first months, is that it was happening to everybody, every foreign journalist who was coming to Kiev. There were so many journalists, probably thousands of foreign journalists in Ukraine, that anybody who could speak good English could become a story. And that manifested itself in several controversial Ukrainian politicians taking the opportunity and getting profiles, including in the British press, about their heroic role in the defense of Ukraine. There are politicians who were, up until the invasion, very pro-Russian and were part of the reason why the invasion happened, and they would be presented as, defending their cities or something like that. So that happened a lot. We just, we laugh about this when we read this heroization. Not a harmful thing exactly, just a mistake that happened in the first months often.
Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, I watched your video Teams thing of the people from the front, the young, young journalists reporting, as you said, frighteningly with just a microphone and camera. It did strike me. Do you ever have a conversation in the office about the intelligence that you're giving away? Because the Russians are watching this, and you talk about morale and counteroffensives.
Well, we are always careful when we report from the front line, especially when there are photos or videos. to not give away something that could be seen as some detail that can be used against Ukrainian military. That actually, there is not a lot that we need to clear out from a story in that case. Like, I remember editing one story recently about it was a report from the area of Bakhmut, which is the city where the heaviest fighting is taking place, and it included some paragraphs about how what's the plan for the Ukrainian military for after the Bakhmut is taken, like where they would go, like what kind of preparations are being done, what kind of like trenches are being dug, and and there is an actual decree by the Ukrainian head of armed forces that came out in the beginning of the invasion that listed all the things that can't be included in the reporting, and that was like exact locations of the military and so on. And I have it in my memory. So when I edit a story, I look for things like that. And from that story, even though the subject was so like detailed, I had to literally take out half a sentence. So it's possible to write about the things without, given the exact details. But still, we had a scare once when not long ago, when a reader told us that one of the photos we have on our website has some metadata with the location in it, and the photo was from a location near the front line that was important to keep the location secret, I'm saying. And we replaced the photo.
I'll get to everybody in time.
David Selves, last autumn in London I interviewed the Polish politician Rakshavets. He had actually flown here from Kiev that night. Somewhat alarmingly, he said he could see this war lasting 20 years, and that whoever followed Putin would be worse. I wonder what your take is.
You said he flew from Kiev?
Yes, he'd been in discussions. He's a Polish politician.
And when was that?
Last autumn.
Last autumn? So autumn of
October, November.
Of 2022?
2022.
Okay. So he probably didn't fly from Kiev unless he was like on a military jet. There is no air connection with Kiev. That's why I'm asking. This kind of rhetoric that whoever comes after Putin can be worse is often used by people who advocate for negotiating with Putin. Honestly, personally, my educated guess is that no, that's not what's going to happen. Just the system that Vladimir Putin built in Russia was built for, he was building it for 20 years. And some circumstances need to come together for this solidifying of power to happen. And I don't, first of all, there is no figure like that in Russian politics. Somebody says Prigozhin, that's nonsense, to replace Putin. And whatever happens after he's gone is, honestly, I don't see how it can be worse. Some people say it's going to be worse in the sense that Russia can fall apart. I don't see Russia falling apart as something absolutely horrible. So my take is, no, I don't agree with that, no.
What do you think will happen with the conflict, though? What do you think is likely to happen in the next few years?
Well, it all depends on, first of all, this year. It all depends on what kind of weapons Ukraine gets and how fast. And it's honestly, like, I can honestly share that it's frustrating sitting in Ukraine and knowing that our allies have the weapons that can end this war very soon in the matter of months, but are not providing them because of some considerations. sometimes political, sometimes being afraid to escalate the war even more. So it's frustrating to know that there are means existing in the world that can end this soon and that can end the suffering and all of it, and they're not being used. So the answer is, I don't know, it depends on you.
Gentleman back. Oh, yeah, sorry. Good. Yeah, good.
Paul Conti, it goes without saying that you and your team are an inspiration, but how worried are you by the fact that despite the support you've got from the UK, from NATO, from America, and to varying degrees from the rest of Europe, that with a Republican Congress and, God forbid, the possibility of a Trump return to the White House, that the levels of financial and military support you need will not last indefinitely?
The answer is very. Especially one aspect of what you mentioned. I mean, I hope that answers it. I mean, yes, the second presidency of Trump would be. I cannot even imagine what it would be for Ukraine, given everything that he's said in the past. So.
Amar Singh, thank you, Olga, for sharing your story. It's incredibly powerful and moving. So it's a real privilege for us to hear your story. You spoke very eloquently about the responsibility you see the British press having and the Western media, as you put it. And I think that message is loud and clear. You mentioned Twitter briefly in your speech. What is your message to Elon Musk and what is your message to Mark Zuckerberg? Because increasingly, those are also gatekeepers of information and news. What responsibility do they have not to repeat the disinformation that we hear coming from the Kremlin?
Well, their responsibility is enormous. And I mean, I haven't followed Mark Zuckerberg's actions recently, but I think that after a certain scandal several years ago, he probably recognized the responsibility. As for Elon Musk, personally, I think he's playing a game. He's having the time of his life, but unfortunately, that game is very, very dangerous to millions of people. And I don't think he realizes how the fun that he's having, the adventure of the lifetime that he's having with Twitter, can be very dangerous and have very bad real-life consequences. And of course, there was this peace plan that Elon Musk promoted on Twitter that was essentially a wish list of Moscow. And yeah, that was very alarming to see that, something like that being picked up and promoted by someone on that level. And also it seemed to be done really thoughtlessly. The arguments he used later in the feed when he defended the plan, they just showed that he didn't know what he was talking about. Like he would be arguing that some areas of Ukraine have voted in the past in elections for a pro-Russian party, and therefore they should be part of Russia. That's such a non-nuanced understanding of what's happening that whoever has so little knowledge of the issue should probably not share their opinion about it.
You mentioned briefly as well in your speech that at some point the algorithms had become such that some of your story wasn't getting as much traction as it had done previously. Have you been able to remedy that, or that must be a huge concern if your stories start disappearing?
So, well, there are several different challenges there. One, there's Twitter that is downplaying Ukraine content. That's unfortunate. But we have our action plan to, I won't share all of it, but one of it is just focusing heavier on other platforms. There is no point, I think, in just trying to get something out of Twitter. If they want to downplay Ukraine content, we shouldn't kill ourselves trying to get through that wall. We are also focusing on other platforms, and one of the important things we're doing, we are really focusing on newsletters, because that allows us to have, to have a more direct contact with the readers, to be in their mailboxes. Well, you all know that how newsletters can be useful, and they're easy to scale. And we actually have pretty good results on our newsletters. Our main one, Ukraine Daily, that we launched even before the Kyiv Independent itself was launched, it still has a nearly 50% open rate.
Is this like a concern with newsletters, though, that you're only serving content to people who are engaged with content, whereas on Twitter and Facebook you can reach...
There is an exploration thing, that doesn't happen with newsletters. But for that, there are other platforms. Hopefully together, other platforms are growing. We just launched our video operation last year, and we're slowly growing our YouTube. We went on TikTok. That's something that you don't have a choice about, right? Combined, the exploration opportunities that other platforms give can replace Twitter.
Do you feel there's almost like a battle here between your attempt at truth and the amount of disinformation that's out there?
Yes, of course. We're definitely a part of that. Russia for decades has been spending millions of dollars to target not just domestic audiences, but foreign audiences with their disinformation, and often with different messages. And as I said, because we understand Russian, we have been following what they've been telling their own people as well. I don't know if you've seen any clips of the Russian state television with subtitles or anything, but it's insane. It's you don't need to watch Black Mirror if you watch that. It's absolutely insane. And yes, I think that disinformation is in terms of the complexity and the impact it has on the world, is the biggest problem of our generation. And whoever finds out how to win against it, it's like curing cancer. It's probably the same level of importance. I don't have the answer to that. We're just trying to do our thing. We're trying to put out stories that are good, that are entertaining in a way, that are reaching the audience. And we're looking at numbers a lot. We're looking at what's working and what's not working. At the same time, I think that it's not a responsible thing to be fully, to allow ourselves to be fully led by the numbers, in the sense that, for example, stories about the human suffering side of the war, they have really went down in terms of, how much the audience wants to read them. And you can do a very important report talking to survivors of torture chambers, for example, but it's going to be very unpopular on the website. And there are people on our team too who said, we should be doing maybe less of those because the audience doesn't seem to be interested. My response to that is we're going to have to do that. It's part of the mission. I don't care how low is the readership on those stories. Our reporters go there to the liberated territories, and they're collecting this evidence, this testimony as it's fresh. And it's important to do it while it's fresh. It's important to record that. Even if, 1,000 people reads a story like that. Okay, but it's there, it's recorded, it's everything there, because years are gonna pass, and not that many years gonna pass, and people are gonna be saying that none of it happened. There are people that deny that Holocaust happened. There are gonna be people who deny that Russian torture chambers existed. So it's important to record that, even if the general public interest in that is not very high in the moment. I think it's part of the mission.
We have just 2 more questions, Doug. Is that all right? Sorry, it's late here. Sorry, Doug.
I just wanted to say and to the point that you just made, continuing on and keeping a public record. It's such a service that Cudlipp is doing to the world. I
Mm-hmm.
long-term titles should be done?
I mean, this is more of a lesson probably for media in our part of the world. And it's that you don't, in our part of the world, there is not much money in the media business. And it's usually sponsored by the owners who tell the media what to write about. And often journalists accept that. And I would say that the most important lesson is to journalists in our part of the world, that it's not necessarily the way to do it. It doesn't have to be accepted. There are other ways. If you just refuse to accept that you can't survive as a journalistic organization, and if you fight for survival, then you can find a way. And we've been, it's easy to see our success as just something that happened because of the war, but that's not true. We've done so much we've worked so hard to make it happen, not just with stories, but I mentioned us working on campaigns to grow our membership base. That's what's paying our bills. By the way, if you're not a member of the Kyiv Independent, it's on our website. It starts from $5 a month. You are okay. Thank you. So it's and it's something that it's not like we have a team or two people working on that. It's the whole team is involved in that, and everybody accepts it as this is part of what we need to be doing. We have community events online, as you know, if you remember, that everybody participates in, and it's it's a joint effort of the team. It's not like journalists are annoyed when they are asked to do something for marketing, for membership, something. No, they're not, because they are really, from the very beginning, we made it very clear to everybody that everyone is in this. And I think it was the very right tone that we set in the newsroom, that we are you are not just journalists writing stories. You are also part of the joint effort to make it a sustainable publication.
Right. So in which case, I've just got one final question, which is: yes, everyone can become a member of the Kyiv Trend, but what else can we here now today as journalists do to help?
Well, first of all, it's not just the Kyiv Independent that needs support, but other Ukrainian media as well. And if you have an opportunity to donate to Ukrainian media that you know about it and you're sure about, that they are a good cause in nature, please do it. But also, most importantly, we all need you to just keep talking about Ukraine in your publications, because just as I mentioned with the stories about the victims of the war, that the public is not that interested in anymore, but we keep doing them because we think it's the right thing to do. It needs to be there, and sometimes we need to take the responsibility and lead the public interest and lead our audience to the stories that we, having our knowledge, having our expertise, know that they are important and they need to be shared and read. Sometimes we need to be leading the public interest and not just being led by it. And that, I think, is the case of Ukraine. It's not, as I said, the war is not just about Ukraine. It's not about some country that is far away from you and your readers. It's about you as well. It's about your readers. It's an attack on all of you. And it's our responsibility as journalists to convey that to our audience.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.